I never thought working late at night could be so terrifying. I had always enjoyed the peace and quiet of the office when everyone else had gone home, but tonight was different. I was typing away at my computer, trying to meet a deadline, when I heard a noise. At first I dismissed it as just a building settling, but then I heard it again. It was a soft, kind of indescribable sound, but it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I got up from my desk and walked around the office, checking to make sure all the doors were locked. Everything seemed to be in order, but the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. I forced myself to go back to work, trying to ignore the feeling that someone or something was watching me. But then I heard the noise again, louder this time. It was coming from the hallway. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should investigate, but then my curiosity got the better of me. I slowly made my way down the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. As I turned the corner, I saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. I couldn't make out any features, but I could tell it was a person. I froze in terror, unsure of what to do. The figure started moving towards me, and I could hear footsteps echoing through the empty office. I turned and ran back to my desk, locking the door behind me. I sat there in silence, waiting for something to happen. The feeling of dread was so intense it was suffocating. I tried to rationalize what I'd seen, but my mind couldn't make any sense of it. Then I heard a tapping on the window. I looked up and saw a face pressed against the glass staring at me with hollow eyes. I screamed and backed away from the window, my heart racing. The tapping continued and I could hear a faint whispering. I couldn't make out what was being said, but it sounded like a language I didn't understand. I felt like I was going to lose my mind. I couldn't stay in the office any longer, but I didn't want to leave either. I was trapped with no way out. Then I heard a voice coming from the other side of the door. It was a deep, guttural voice, and it said my name. I felt like I was going to pass out from fear. I mustered up all my courage and opened the door, ready to face what was on the other side. But there was nothing there. The hallway was empty, and the tapping had stopped. I knew I had to get out of there. I grabbed my things and ran towards the elevator, but when the doors opened, there was someone inside. I leapt back in total panic, losing my footing and falling to the floor. As I looked up, scrambling to get my feet, a familiar voice asked, "What's going on? Are you okay?" It was our office cleaner, who looked more afraid than I did. I explained to her what had happened, and she said how she had just unlocked the main door to get in. We checked the 2 floors and looked on the security camera footage, but one camera was out and we couldn't see any movement on the rest of the cameras. I've never been so relieved to see our cleaner. I never worked late at night again. The warehouse was always super quiet at night. I had worked the late shift for months, and I'd grown used to the hum of the machines and the occasional sound of a vehicle passing by outside. I was doing my routine inventory check, making my way through the maze of shelves and boxes, when I heard a noise. It was a faint, rustling sound, like something moving in the shadows. I stopped in my tracks, listening intently. The noise persisted, growing louder and more distinct. I tried to brush it off as just my imagination, but the unease in my gut wouldn't let me. I continued my inventory check, my heart pounding in my chest. The noise followed me, like a sinister presence lurking in the darkness. As I turned a corner, I thought I saw something move, but at this stage I think the adrenaline and my imagination were getting the better of me. I slowly approached the boxes, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement, but there was nothing there. I shook my head, roasting myself for being so paranoid, but the lingering dread wouldn't go away. I tried to shake it off and focus on my work, but then I heard the noise again. It was louder this time, and it was coming from behind me. I spun around, my heart racing, but there was no one there. The warehouse was empty, except for me. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. The quiet of the warehouse was suffocating, and the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I decided to take a break, to clear my head and get some fresh air. I made my way towards the loading dock, hoping that the cool night air would calm my nerves. As I stepped outside, I saw a movement in the shadows. It was too dark to make out any features, but I could tell someone was there. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should call out to them, but my instinct took over and I ran. I turned and ran back inside the warehouse, my heart banging in my chest. I locked the door behind me, hoping that it would keep me safe, but the figure didn't give up. It continued to circle the warehouse, tapping on windows and rattling door handles. It was like it was toying with me, playing a game of cat and mouse. I tried to call for help, but my phone had no signal and I was trapped, with no way out. The noises started to get more aggressive, slamming on the windows and doors, trying to force its way inside. I could hear it whispering, a low, mumbling sound that sent shivers down my spine. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there and wait for it to get me. I made my way to the machine room, hoping to find something I could use to defend myself. I grabbed a wrench and a flashlight, trying to steady my shaking hands. As I made my way back to the front of the warehouse, I heard a crash. The figure had broken through one of the windows, and it was coming for me. I braced myself, ready to fight, but when the figure stepped into the light, I saw that it was just a person, a homeless man looking for shelter from the cold. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The figure wasn't a monster or a serial killer. I helped the man up, offering some hot coffee and a warm place to rest for a bit. He thanked me and seemed super grateful to be out of the cold. As we talked, I realised that sometimes things that scare us most are just our own fears. I finished my inventory check, feeling more at ease than I had in hours. The quiet of the warehouse was no longer suffocating. It was comforting, like an old friend. It was a fairly typical Friday night, and I'd just started my Uber shift. I had been driving for a few months now, and I'd grown accustomed to the late night rides and the occasional rowdy passengers, but this night would be a lesson. As the night wore on, I noticed that the streets were quieter than usual. It was as if the entire city had gone to bed early. That was until I received a ride request from a quiet suburb on the outskirts of the city. I pulled up to the address and waited. After a few minutes, I received a message from the rider saying that they were running late and to wait a few more minutes. I didn't mind waiting, but something about the message felt weird. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but my instincts were telling me that something wasn't right. Finally, the rider arrived. As they opened the door to get in, I immediately noticed that they had their hood up and a mask on. Still none of my business if someone wants to dress like the Unabomber. I couldn't see their face, but I could feel their eyes on me. "Can you confirm the address, please?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. They gave an address way over on the other side of town. The voice was muffled by the mask, so I had to ask twice. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The rider was quiet, not making any small talk, and seemed to be staring straight ahead the whole time. I tried to make conversation, but they didn't seem interested. As we got further from the city centre, the streets became more deserted. I began to feel genuinely scared. Eventually, some way down a quiet tree-lined street, the rider told me quite suddenly to stop. There was a car parked on the side of the road with its lights off. It looked like it had been abandoned. The rider spoke up. "Just wait here," they said. "I'll be 5 minutes." So there I was, pulled over to the side of the road, feeling like I had walked into some weird situation. The rider got out of the car and disappeared into the darkness, and I was left alone. Suddenly the lights inside the abandoned car came on, and I saw my rider get in. The door closed, and the car, back in darkness now, just stayed where it was. I wondered what the hell this guy could be doing. Suddenly I heard footsteps running. They were getting closer and closer. I reflexively locked all the doors, and I was trapped. The footsteps continued right past my car. I could hear breathing, heavy and laboured. I was frozen in fear, not knowing what to do. Suddenly the lights came back on in the other car, and I saw another hooded figure climb inside the passenger seat. The door clunked shut, returning the inside of the car to darkness. A couple of minutes passed, and I spent every second thinking I should just start up the car and speed away. But there was no real reason to leave the rider out here, so from a warped sense of manners as much as anything else, I stayed. I don't know if I zoned out, fell asleep or what. but I jumped, startled, as someone was rattling the handle of the back door. It took me a second to realise it was the rider, and another couple of seconds to remember I'd locked the door in fear. I unlocked the door with a "sorry about that, can't be too careful," as they got back into the car. "Heading back now," was all they said. I didn't know what to make of what had just happened. Some sort of sketchy deal gone wrong? A setup? What was going on in the abandoned car? Whatever it was, I didn't want to be involved, and I knew that I needed to get out of there as fast as possible. As I drove back towards the city, I couldn't help shake the feeling that I had just been involved in something dangerous and at the very least illegal. The rider was silent for the rest of the ride, and when we finally reached their destination, they simply got out of the car and disappeared into the night. I sat in my car for a few minutes trying to catch my breath. I hadn't actually witnessed anything happen at all, so I didn't report anything. I'm just a lot more careful with my locations now. A few years ago I was pulling a late night at the office, and I was the last one there. The only sound came from the hum of the fluorescent lights and the tapping of my keyboard as I worked on the latest project. I'd always enjoyed working late, until that night. As the hours ticked by, this random sense of fear just grew in me. The office felt kind of darker, and I had that feeling of dread in my gut. I tried to brush it off as exhaustion and just being there alone, but the tension in my body refused to dissipate. I decided to take a break and get some sugar and caffeine from the vending machine. As I walked towards the elevator, I felt a chill. I turned round but saw nothing out of the ordinary. I shrugged it off and pressed the button for the elevator. As I waited, I noticed the digital display of the elevator was flickering, as if something funny was going on with the electricity. The doors opened without the characteristic ping sound, and I hesitated for a moment. Inside the elevator was completely dark. I'm claustrophobic at the best of times, and I was not about to get into a pitch-black elevator that was acting up. I pushed the adjacent door to the stairwell, bolted down 2 flights and stepped out into the lobby, only to find it empty. The receptionist's desk was deserted, and there was no sign of anyone else. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Had something happened? I headed towards the door, but as I reached for the handle, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around to see someone emerging from the shadows. I couldn't make out their face, but I knew it wasn't anybody I recognised. Panic set in as they started to approach me. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen in place as the stranger got closer and closer. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, and I could feel sweat running down my back. The stranger stopped just a few feet away from me. They didn't say anything, just stared right at me. The tension in the air was palpable, and I didn't know what to do. Suddenly the lights flickered and the stranger disappeared. I was left standing in the dark, alone and terrified. I had to get out of there, but my legs felt like jelly and still refused to move. After what felt like an eternity, I finally managed to get myself under control and made a run for the door. I burst out into the night air, gasping for breath. I looked back at the building, but there was no sign of the stranger, or anyone. I made my way home, still shaking from the encounter. I had no idea what had just happened in like a few minutes. The next day, I tried to tell my co-workers what had happened, but none of them believed me. They said the receptionist was probably having a break, and that I was probably just tired and overworked. But I know what I saw. I know that someone was there in the dark with me.